Have you ever wondered how to make your art shine without using glitter? Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. Today I'm going to be showing you an easy way to create shimmering effects with just watercolor pencils. It's surprisingly simple and a perfect way to add shine and sparkle to your Christmas projects. Let's go ahead and get started. For watercolor pencils, I've got my Faber-Castell as well as some Staedtler. And I didn't actually happen to have a great Christmas red in these particular pencils that I had on hand. So I have one other brand here that I'm throwing in there just to have a Christmas red. But you can just use a Christmas red in whatever brand you have. Why don't we start out with some traditional round Christmas baubles. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a circle. If you'd rather do this initial circle in pencil first because you feel more comfortable, go ahead and do that. I'm just going to very lightly come in here and draw my circle, get it the way I want it, and then I can get a little darker as I go, but I like to kind of start light and make sure I'm happy with the shape, and then I can deepen things. So I think I'm pretty happy with this. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start coloring it. Actually, let's grab our green and do a Christmas bauble right beside it. Again, you can see how I draw very tentatively at first, very lightly, and just kind of get that shape sketched in, and then when I'm happy with it, I deepen the values here, put a little more pressure. I'm going to press a little lighter as I come into my highlight area here. And then around this area where my highlight is, I actually have a color that's a little bit more of a red-orange, and I'm going to actually fill in this side here that's closer to the highlight with a little bit of this color, just almost like there's going to be a slightly warm or orange undertone on this side of our little bauble. You can't really see it very well now, but it should show up when I go to wet it later. Then I'm going to grab a purpley color, and I'm going to, this is called Red Violet. It's by Faber-Castell, but any maroon or burgundy would work really well for this. And I'm going to color in this area here, kind of like a crescent shape, so that I get a little bit of a shadow. And I'll just come around the whole outside of the ball with just a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of this color. And then if I want to push it even further, I could put a tiny little bit of indigo blue of all colors right at the farthest, well, right kind of in the center of my other crescent, if you will. So it's kind of just about like there. You can kind of see where I've got it super dark. And I'm just going to call that good for now. And then I'm actually going to do a couple of these little, I don't know what you call these things on the top of the ornaments that hold them on there, but I'm just going to go ahead and do this kind of like with a little bit of a rounded top. And I'm going to do it both to my green and my red baubles here. Let's just do something like this. And then I'm going to do little lines to fill them in. So I'm going to come up about halfway, and then I'm going to lighten off my pressure and leave it, again, like a little bit of a highlight there. Do the same thing here. So I'm doing little lines to fill it in, lighten off, and almost skip an area, and then get a little bit dark again. I'm just going to put a little bit of a darkness along the bottom of it. And then on each of them, I can put like a little hook. And if we want to, we can, put something to actually make them hang, or just leave them like that. But hey, why don't we just do a little hanger here? Maybe we can even throw a little pine branch or something in here too. I don't know. Or not. You can just leave it like that. And then with this one, I'm actually going to go ahead and do it to have a little bit of a sparkly look. So I'm going to grab my green. Once again, I'm going to kind of make myself an area where I don't want to fill it in, where I want my highlight to be. And then I'm going to kind of do little jagged little scribble things to fill it in. So instead of doing a, as you saw on that other one, where I was perfectly smooth, or I shouldn't say perfectly smooth, but I tried to be some more smooth. This time I'm actually going to kind of just do these little scribbles, little dot scribbles, whatever, just kind of leaving some white gaps so that I'm not perfectly smooth. Again, I'll try and refine that shape a little bit at the edge and keep doing these little scribbles or dots. You can almost do them like little stars. I'm just trying to get a little bit of the impression that this is a little bit of a glittery ball. And I'm doing it pretty quick, and I'm not spending a lot of time overthinking these little scribbles, but just trying to give them give it a little bit of texture. All right, then I'm going to grab a darker green, and this one is by Faber-Castell, and I'm going to just once again do that kind of crescent shape on the left side of the ball, and I'm still continuing to use the scribbling kind of motion or texture. It's harder to see when I'm in the shadows, but I am kind of doing the same scribbles that I was doing before. I'll put a few little dots of it at the side, not too many. Then I'm going to grab my indigo blue once again, which again is a very, very dark color, and I'm going to continue doing this little scribbly thing in my darkest areas. So this will be my shadow area, put a little bit at the very edge. Sometimes I like to leave just a small area where it's a little bit less shadow because we have some reflected light, we call it. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how shadows work, but typically you'll have your highlight, and then you'll have kind of just your main color in this area, and then you'll have your shadow. And often in the shadow, there can be like a very slight hint of light somewhere in this area, because light can tend to reflect into that shadow area sometimes. So just keep that in mind. It's just a kind of extra little thing to think about. And if you're feeling ambitious, you could even throw a little branch in here to kind of pretend they're kind of maybe hanging on a tree. I know these ones that are hanging a little higher up, obviously, because I made those little hooks go higher, but if you want to throw some pine in here, you could. Actually, I want to add a little bit more thickness to this branch before I go in with my green. Might even throw a couple browns, just because sometimes the brown can be a little bit too, that particular brown I grabbed was a little bit on the orangey side once I get it wet. Okay, so then I'm going to grab my traditional green again and just throw in a few little of these pine needles. If you want to see me do more pine, you can watch my video on the Christmas botanicals. But right now I'm just drawing these tiny little lines or little flick type pine needles that radiate out from the center of my branch. So sometimes I'll make them poke out a little more. Sometimes I'll make them go a little bit more, not quite parallel with the branch, but sort of, especially as I come towards the end of my little pine branch here. And like I say, this is totally optional. The video isn't really about these little pine branches, but hey, why not have a little bonus, right? We need some pine for this to hang on. All right. And if you want to, you can always throw in a tiny bit of other greens, but if you want to keep it simple, stick with one color. Sometimes I do like throwing a touch of brown into my greens. That's totally optional. This is my darker brown. You can do what you want though. Like I say, I kind of have a thing for throwing extra colors in there. All right, let's move on. Let's go ahead and do our bell. And I'm going to give myself an axis line for that. Basically, this is just a line that kind of works like a plumb line to help me stay straight. And I'm doing it fairly lightly with a pencil so that I can erase it. Then I'm going to go ahead and draw a couple of ellipses. These are kind of like an oval shape thing. I'm just kind of coming in. I have more information on cylindrical objects in another video. I'll include a link for it below so that I don't go into a lot of detail here, but I'm using the same concept to draw the bell as I used to draw my bugs or any cylindrical object. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, erase that. I went a little sloppy with my ellipse. As you can see, I do come in quite tentatively at first. And I think I'm going to put another ellipse, I don't know, maybe like somewhere here, just to give me a little bit of guidance as I draw this. I know this is seeming like a really weird way to draw a bell, but just bear with me here. So I'm going to try and connect the top ellipse here to this ellipse here. As you can see, I'm trying to get symmetry on both sides, and I'm just looking back and forth from one side to the other, but having these ellipses is helping. And then from here to here, I'm going to just tip this outwards like this. And if we go like so, we can say this is the inside of the bell that we can actually see. And we could draw one of these little, I don't know what we call these, the thing that makes it go dong. I'm super technical. I'm an artist, not much else, I guess. Don't come to me for vocabulary. Put that like that, and then I'll erase all my, do I like that bell? It almost feels a little bit oblong, like it could have been a bit shorter. I could just bring it in a bit here, just kind of make that top ellipse to be maybe more like here. This is being a little persnickety now, I think. I probably don't need to be this persnickety, but I could bring this down a little bit. I think I might like the shape of the bell better. I feel like I was a bit, I don't know, oblong. This is why I'm using a pencil. Gives me more grace. I would recommend you use a pencil too if you're not 100% confident in drawing this bell. I'm just going to go ahead with my kneadable eraser and get rid of the lines I don't need, as well as lighten even the lines that I do need. So I don't want to get rid of these outlines completely, but I don't want them to be so dark, because if you know how it goes with watercolor or watercolor pencil, any medium where you're going to be wetting it, as soon as you add water, that pencil line becomes permanent. So we don't want to have too much for pencil lines. Should we do a bow? Let's do a bow. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this kind of almost like a little square at the top of my bell, but it's rounded. It's not a perfect square. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw this little section of the bow. And do the same thing here. Try and more or less get it symmetrical if you can help it. And sometimes, you know, bows even will have it where they're flipped, and this, it's kind of like the opposite on this side, but I'm going to make this kind of a cuter symmetrical bow and make this come down. Is that long enough? Should we make this one longer? I don't know, what do you guys think? You can always make them more symmetrical with each other if you want. I kind of like the one being shorter on this side, though. Do I want to make it longer? No, I'll leave it. You can do what you want to do with yours. I think I like it like that. Sometimes I don't decide how I like things till after I've done it, though. So, and this is going to be the little hook, or the, let's make it a little more round. This is basically just more ribbon, but I'm trying to make a loop of ribbon. So it's going to flatten off at the top. So we're going to do something like that, and then have it open again like that. So basically it's flat at the top, and this kind of comes across like that. And then this kind of picks up somewhere like there. Call that good for the bell. And then should we just go ahead and color it? I think we should. I'm just going to lighten those lines a smidgen, because like I say, things are getting a bit bold. And to color it, I am going to come in here and yes, let's leave a highlight. And if you find that bow is annoying, you really don't have to have a bow on it. So I'm going to leave a space for the highlight here. I just have a habit of making my highlights on the right side. It just makes it easier to keep track of, like always having, you're almost always having a light source on the right so that your shadows are on the left. There's no reason you have to do it that way, other than if you're just consistently, every time you're like drawing from your imagination using the same light source, you just kind of get in the habit of using that light source. I don't know if that's good to use that habit or not, but that's what I do. I'm going to color this whole thing in with this color. This is kind of a golden yellow. It's called Golden Ochre. It's by Staedtler, but you can definitely use whatever color you have. I have a similar color by Faber-Castell, and it is called Light Yellow Ochre. That would also work. Let's try it. Yeah, both colors are nice. I would recommend obviously sticking with one color, but that one works too. So use what you have and fill that bell in. Then I've got several browns that I have as options for kind of doing my shadows, and I'm going to actually recommend you maybe even test your browns and see which ones you like. I'm going to start with this one that's a little bit more orangey. It's called Burnt Sienna, and I'm going to go ahead and fill this in. And actually what I'm going to do is, I think this time I'm going to make my shadows a little bit, I'm using more like a linear direction to my strokes here. I'm actually going along with the line, or I should say the curvature of the ellipse here, as I color this. This is called shadow modeling. I've taught a little bit about it before in my mug video, or again, the cylinder videos, but I'm just gonna go ahead, and you can even just use like a circular motion. You don't even have to worry about the, you know, curving it with the shape of the bell, but I'm just gonna go ahead and fill this in, and I'm gonna have a kind of darker line, somewhat to the center, but more to the side. I want this a little bit to the left. And then I'm going to do darker again down this side. Let's just get it nice and deep. Whoops. Whew, I went over the lines there, which sometimes doesn't matter, but I want symmetry to this bell, so oh well. Don't think I went too bad, but try and sort of stay in the lines. Just always do what I say and not what I do. Okay, I'm liking that. but I've left, as you can see, it's kind of like it goes dark here, like it's like dark along the very far left side, then it's a little lighter, and then it gets darker again. Then we're going to let it get light. I'm going to put a little bit of shadow under this bow. Let's just do that. Let's just create a shadow with this bow on both sides of the bow. Let's do that. Just makes it a little bit more lifelike. I'm going to create a little bit of an outline along this side of the bell, just because sometimes as light kind of, or I should say as the bell kind of, because it's round, it's curving away from us, so there's often a little tiny bit of shadow or just darker color because it's receding away from us. And then everything is going to be lightest closer to the highlight. And I'm not going to put too much of this golden color here, or this is actually the burnt sienna, I should say. And then I will throw in this deeper brown because I know that my burnt sienna tends to be a little bit orange when I get it wet. So I'm going to come in on top of that and put a little this deeper, darker brown, but not too much. This brown is almost too dark. I'm not too crazy about it, but it does tend to lend a very neutral tone. And some of my browns are like more on the red side, more on the orange side. So this one is kind of in between. So I'm just going to go ahead and use it. And I'm using it on top of my burnt sienna color. So just along this side where it's really dark, and then I put a little bit here. I don't want too much of it. It's a very strong color, but it will help the situation. And I'm going to put a little bit along here. You can kind of see how that's shaping up already, hey? Let's go ahead and add some shadows inside of here. So let's just do this old dong thing first so we don't lose it. I know, I need to learn what this thing is called. I know, I need to learn what it's properly called, but anyways, you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to do like a little bit of that crescent shape shadow, the same that we did on those. And then I'm going to be reversing the way that these shadows are happening on the inside, okay? So by that I mean, yes, the whole thing will be more shaded, but the shadow is actually going to be more on this side because the light's being blocked by the bell itself, if that makes sense. So I'm going to come in like this, and I'm going to create my shadow with this kind of a stroke. So it's curving almost like along with the base of this. Does that make sense? I'm going to put a little bit of shadow under here too, because it's going to be dark up there. Just because of the way the whole bell is casting its shadow on top of the inside of it, but I do want to have a little bit of light on this side. So overall, inside can be dark, but I do want to have some light. I'm trying overall kind of have this slight curve to my shading that follows the direction of the very bottom edge of this bell. Kind of like this, swooping a little bit. So coloring it with a slight swoop, and then I'll come in with my darker brown, put it on this side here, and I'll accentuate these shadows over here. Again, same kind of direction. Could even put a little bit here. Probably this little thing is even casting a shadow, so we could even put a little bit here. A little bit of shadow there with the darker. So I picked up a little bit of my burnt sienna and back to the dark brown. Let's go a little bit darker here. Okay, we'll see how that's going to work. I think that's going to look okay. Do you enjoy working in watercolor pencil? If so, I think you'll be interested in my free 2-part pencil technique mini workshop. Whether you're looking for ways to add texture to your work, or if you simply enjoy coloring and would like to add dimension to your coloring pages, this workshop is for you. You can even apply many of these techniques to graphite pencil or other dry media. I'll share examples of how I apply these techniques to inspire you with ideas for your own artwork. You can sign up for this workshop at the link in the description below. Now back to today's video. Color our little bow quickly here. So I'm going to use both these reds again, the same way I did over here. I might even start with the one that's a little bit more on the orangey side, okay? And then I'm going to fill this in. So let's just go ahead and just give it an outline first. And then I'm going to make the highlight kind of in this area here. So I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of follow the direction of this ribbon, if you will. So kind of almost curving my strokes. Almost like I'm doing the same thing that I did with the bell, where when I color, I'm curving it to go with the shape of the ribbon. So something like that. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Let's just, you can go with a straight line at the very edge there, but then kind of stroke them out, and you don't have to do the direction that I'm doing. Like I like to kind of color in the direction of the object, if you will, but there's really no reason you have to. Sometimes I just do like a solid kind of circular coloring, and that works really well too. So do what you're comfortable with. You don't have to follow me with the exact direction that I'm using my pencil strokes, but it does add a little bit of something to it, doesn't it? Okay. Gonna leave a little bit of a highlight there. Nice, but not necessary. Fill this in. I'm not as worried about the fact you can see my pencil lines as boldly as you can, just because this red is going to be so much darker than our gold, right? So then I'm going to fill this in kind of lightly with this color because I'm actually, and you can see here, I'm just filling it in solid. I'm going to get more texture with a deeper color. Then just fill these in. And then I'll come in with my deeper red right away here, my Christmassy red. I just found that the Christmas red, when I didn't have it as, when I wasn't coloring as heavy with it, it ended up not being quite enough pigment, and then it looked pink when I was using this one. So that's why I went in first with that kind of orangey one. Then I'm gonna basically repeat it with this Christmassy kind of red. So I'll just speed it up as I do it because I'm just basically tracing what I just did. And then finally, I'm gonna come in with my red violet and add some shadows. So just in some places, kind of like on the left lower side of that little knot in the middle, put a little bit kind of like so, a little bit more on this side. Again, darken it kind of where it's going in towards that knot, if you will. And then I'm gonna put some on this side here. Actually probably want a little bit more because this is the side that's further from the light. Could probably even put a little more red there, make our highlight just a little bit less pronounced. Doesn't have to be quite so strong. Okay. And under here, absolutely, we're gonna have dark. And then back down here as it comes close to the knot. And then up here, really wherever it's close to the knot, it's kind of getting, you know, pulled away from the light, if you will. It's kind of just dark in there. So that's why I'm making more shadows. And then definitely we want to go dark with these. You could go in the direction of the bow, but as you can see, I kind of just filled it in. Not too much special there. Okay, and there is our bow on our bell. Why don't we go ahead and draw a wreath, and then we'll do some snowflakes, and then we will go ahead and wet everything. So I'm just gonna draw another circle, just like so. About like that. You can absolutely make this larger. I'm just gonna do a small wreath, but you could easily, so if you wanted to put this on a card, say, it would be this size, but you could easily make it larger. Okay, and then let's do the center of it, kind of in here. Almost like we're drawing a donut, except the hole I've got on here is a little bit bigger than a donut. Trying to kind of get that a little symmetrical, a little bit sloppy, but you can see pencil lets you be pretty sloppy and get things how you want it. So I'm just lifting it so it's fairly light. I don't want this to be super bold. And then, you know what? Do we like doing bows today? I think it would be cute to do a bow again on here. I'm gonna do it really quick. I'm gonna fast forward it as I do it because I think you kind of have the idea of what I did from up there. So let's just do the same thing. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and start filling this in. What I'm gonna do is do some berries, and I'm just gonna go right on there with my red pencil. But if you wanna add like more balls or baubles or whatever you wanna add to your wreath, add it before we add the greenery, but I'm gonna keep it sort of simple, and I'm just gonna do these little tiny berries in clusters. So just doing these little dots, and I'm gonna kind of move this way around the wreath with the direction that I'm gonna go with my berries. Like I say, you can do whatever size you want, or even if you want to add other colors. I don't know, I'm just gonna kind of be traditional today and just stick with traditional red. Then I'm gonna come in and do some pine, and I'm gonna add a few pine branches that are more defined, and then I'm gonna just kind of almost fill in the rest, almost in a scribbly way. So I'm just gonna do a few of these that are a little bit more defined, and then I'm gonna just fill in the blanks. So basically draw a line like that for the stem, and then all these little pine needles can just kind of come on after it. You're definitely gonna want a sharper pencil for this just to keep your pine needles from getting too flat and dull. Then I'm just going to come in here and fill in some of these with just like these little green scribbles. And every now and then I can add a few sprigs that kind of come out as I feel like I need them. But really, to fill in the center, I'm just kind of scribbling. Making my scribbles go in the direction of the wreath, but they're scribbles nonetheless. So I'll just speed this up since it's going to be a lot of little scribbles. You'll definitely want to take note that I'm making some of these poke outwards as I go. This part's kind of mindless. It's actually therapeutic. I'm just scribbling. Then you can just come in and make sure that everything's looking somewhat symmetrical. You don't have anything too crazy happening in any weird spots. I might even throw a tiny little bit of my dark brown in here just for a bit of variety, because I do feel like my greens get a little bit, look, when I just don't have any brown. That's up to you though. I'm just throwing a few little brown scribbles, if you will, on some of these little branches. You could even just kind of almost think you're adding a little bit of a pine branch, if you will, to make these little needles hold on to, if that makes sense. Basically, they're growing off of the little bits of branches, but you can add them like branches or you can just add them like little scribbles. Just don't do anything really stark or big. I'm going to throw a few little berries right here since I have a little bit of space. And once again, I'm going to do the bow the way I did before, so I'll speed it up because you already know how to do bows. But I'm going to take a shortcut and I'm going to try and just get by with one red and my red violet for the shadows. So there's our wreath. And now I'm going to go ahead and do a few fun snowflakes just to top this off. I like to do my snowflakes so that there's always 6 sides. That's typically how I like to do it, which means I kind of give myself a guideline where I try and divide this almost like a pie shape, right? So I kind of more or less have 6 equal sides. That's not very equal, but you know what I'm saying? You can do a snowflake just by doing like dividing something into 4, right? Where you kind of just do like so. You can even make the X in the middle to be a little bit smaller, and that really can make a reasonably fine snowflake. But for whatever reason, even though I'm an artist and I tend to take way too much artistic license, for some reason, when I do snowflakes, I still want them to have 6 sides, so go figure. So if you want your snowflakes to be divided into 6, like I do mine, it might be helpful to have a pencil just to kind of make sure you're more or less happy with how you've divided it. I just think it's a little touch trickier to divide something into 6 than to divide it into like quarters and then into 8ths, right? So I would say grab a pencil maybe for yourself just to kind of make sure you're happy first, and then you can decide how many of these you want to do. If you want to throw them all around your page, you can, but they would honestly be perfectly fine to just do a few of them on this lower side here. Now the pencil that I really like to use for the snowflakes is this dark indigo once again. It is just one of my favorite colors because it ends up being such a beautiful neutral tone. So what I'm going to do is use this pencil. If you'd rather do all your designs with a regular pencil and then add the watercolor pencil after, you can. I think I'm just going to give it a shot with going in here and using this pencil. So in this one, I'm going to go ahead and just trace my basic outline, and then I'm going to come in here and do something like this. So I'm basically creating a hexagon. You can see I'm a little lopsided with my spacing of my snowflake here, but oh well. And then I'm going to put a smaller line in between each of these. And you might find it easier as you do this to like be flipping your book, or if you do this on smaller pieces of paper instead of writing in a sketchbook, you can just be flipping it around. It's fine to do it this way. You just have to move your hand around so that you get the lines more or less symmetrical. Then I'm going to go ahead and kind of make like, I don't know if you want to say this is quite a heart shape, but kind of, and then a smaller one, and then a little dot. So I'm going to do that to each of these. So a little heart, slightly smaller one, and then a dot. You can almost say they're like 2 leaves or something too. It could be a heart or 2 leaves. Really, you have so much freedom with snowflakes because every snowflake is different, right? God's put so much variety in his creation. And because every snowflake's different, you've got lots of room to play. I'm going to go ahead and just do little hearts in between here. Okay, this would be easier if I was moving my page around. You can really see I slept on my symmetry. This is not perfectly divided in 6, but it's going to be okay. We'll do, I think these other ones are more even than the one I just did. So hopefully we'll be fine. And let's go ahead and try something a little different this time. Instead of going with straight lines, I'm going to do a swoop. Actually, let's just do these ones first. Okay, then I'm going to do these little swoops. And then inside, I'm going to go ahead and do a little triangle in each of these. And then let's do a little dot on the end of each of these. I don't know, let's do just a little small little, almost like smile in the middle of these. Just kind of follow that same swoop. I might even just do a kind of a little line after that. I don't know, you just kind of have to go around until you're happy with what you've got. Don't think I want to go out any further. I'm almost bumping into the wreath there, but let's put a little dot here too. I'm going to go ahead and outline this one. I might not do that to all of them. I'm actually thinking I'm going to try one with some circles in a minute, but this one I'm going to carry on with the same kind of outline of the 6 sections. And then I'm going to fill in a smaller area here. So this center piece will be a little smaller than it was before. Maybe I'll put a dot in each of these little sections. It's getting a little blurry. I'm getting kind of small there, aren't I? What should we do next? Let's try this. Let's do some lines and then a dot, some lines and then a dot. So the bottom line, we want to have it longer than the top one. I have a feeling this one's going to get a little bit, I'm going a little heavy-handed on this one, so I don't think I'm going to like it maybe quite as much. We'll see. Yeah, I actually kind of like it just like that. I'm going to leave that one be. Down here, I'm going to do something a little bit different with this one. I am going to make a bunch of like circles here instead of outlining everything. So I'm going to put a circle in the middle, and then I'll do a circle on each of these. So let's try and make them about the same size. I think I'm going to have to sharpen my pencil here in a minute. I'm starting to feel like I'm getting dull, which is okay because I'm going to be wetting everything and it will blur out. I'm going to go over and enlarge these just a bit because I want these ones to be the biggest. And then I'm going to make the circles. I'm going to put a circle, a total of 3 circles on each of these lines that we drew earlier. See how fun it is to do snowflakes? You can just use your imagination and really just kind of have fun with it and play. And then I might do something like, I don't know if you want to quite call this a heart shape or a little bit like, kind of like a heart, but it's also kind of like a V shape. It's maybe a heart makes you think you have to be too perfect. Just do this little shape like this. Kind of fill it in a little bit. I'm going to just do this one actually in case any of you would prefer to not divide things in 6 and you want to go ahead with this kind of shape. Let's do something with it. We can definitely make it work. I'm going to try the same sort of thing I had done up here, but I'm going to fill them in so that they're less hollow. I'm going to do that to the 4 bigger ones, then I'll figure out what I'm doing with the small one. Or this, I should say this, the 4 smaller ones. I might just do a bigger kind of a heart shape on each of these. We'll see what we think of this. Or again, you could say they're like 2 little leaves or something. Do you like that one? I don't know. It's okay. I'm going to do these. I had a couple of spots for snowflakes over here too. So I'm going to do another one of like kind of like that one that I did there because I don't know. I'm not too happy that I have that one a little lopsided. So I'm going to do the same thing. But maybe make a few minor adjustments. After all, we're doing snowflakes. They're not supposed to be the same, right? Maybe instead of doing those like that, we'll actually do little triangles this time. And I'll make these a little bit bigger. I think it is easier to keep the symmetry if you do turn your page as you do this, but and maybe we'll make the little ones between here dark. Alrighty, we're almost there. One more to go. Maybe what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to almost make each of these kind of petal shape. Put a dot in the middle. And let's just do lines between these ones. And maybe a dot at the end of these. Maybe I'll just do a tiny little V shape between each of those. I'm just going to connect these, and that might help kind of keep our effect of being kind of six-sided again in this snowflake. And maybe I'll do like a little teardrop at the end of those, or not even a teardrop, just kind of an oval shape, just to kind of stretch it out a little bit so it's a little bit less of a circle or a ball. And then if you're in the mood, you could just go ahead and do a few of these tiny little stars. And I'm trying to kind of keep with that six-sided star, but I'm just going to put a few of them in a few places. It just kind of adds a little touch. You could even turn some of them into like miniature snowflakes if you want to. All right, let's go ahead and add the water at long last. So I have my Simply Simon's brushes here. I do like these because they're nice and firm for blending. And then I got my paper towel because with watercolor pencil, I want to keep my brush fairly dry as I'm working, especially when I'm working in areas that are a little bit more touchy or that I'm really happy with already and I don't want to get things too wet. Some areas I'll be wetter, but I often work with a drier brush. So let's go ahead and start with these baubles. And I'm going to just come in here and I'm going to wet the first one in the area where we haven't applied really any color in the highlight. And then I'm going to work my way out of the highlight and into the rest of the bauble. So I want to maintain that highlight. And if I feel like it's kind of getting a little weird looking, I can just use clear water and just softly blend that. I don't want a hard edge at the outside of my highlight there, but I just want to make sure it's just gentle and soft in its transition from white to red. And then I'm just going to go around and I'm doing the lightest areas first. So staying out of the shadow at the beginning. And then once I'm happy with that section, I go into the shadow. I just take it cautiously. I don't want to go too crazy too soon because that shadow color, I don't want to drag it into my bright reds, right? So I always work from my lightest areas to my darkest areas. And I'm fairly dry. But it's just a balancing act. You don't really want to be sopping wet, but you also do need it wet enough that it blends. And if it's too dry, you're going to have kind of just a dry looking effect, which sometimes is nice, but okay. I'm just going to smooth that out a little bit. I feel like it's a little bit too dry, or just the paint is kind of sitting a little bit more textured than I'd like. For this particular bauble, I want the other one more textured, so I want this one more smooth. All right, I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to let it dry before I do the green one because I don't want to have the colors blended together in this case. Sometimes with watercolor pencil, I do like that kind of flow back and forth, but I think with these ones, I want a little bit tighter blending that's happening here. A little less loose. So why don't we just jump right into the bow over here? Actually, let's do the bell. The bell's harder than the bow, so let's give ourselves, get past the harder part first. So I'm going to wet, again, the light side. I'm going to work my way over to that slight bit of shadow that's there. And work my way down. Come over here. And I might even do a little bit of this motion with my brush as I come down so that I kind of maintain a little bit of the way I've colored with a little bit of texture there. Remember how I added the brown? I kind of did a little bit of back and forth scribbly thing. So I'm going to do that there. And come up again here, try and do the lightest sections of this, and then I'll work into my shadow here, or I should say my darkest shadow. And I'm going to go along the edge just so that it's nice and smooth. Yeah, I think I like that. And I'm going to let this section dry so that it doesn't completely blend together, but I'm gonna do this little shape here, and then I'll let it dry for a sec and come back into the other part. So while that's drying, maybe we can do some snowflakes over here, and then we'll do our wreath and kind of work our way again from left to right. And I'm going to be a little wetter when I'm doing the snowflakes because I actually want that blue color to sort of blend around in a few places. I really like the soft light blue effect that happens when I'm really wet. I don't want to be so wet that everything gets sloppy, but I do want to have a little bit more of this, I don't know, watercolor look. And to get more of the watercolor look, you add more water, and you just kind of have to touch it and leave it alone once you get it wet. You can see I'm getting like miniature little puddles on these shapes, and I'm okay with that because I think that's the look I'm after. Okay. Again, you can see I'm being really wet here and letting this kind of get more of a watercolor look. You can even, with the water on my brush, I could add these little dots into here. That's kind of fun. Just, woo, slopped up a little bit. Oh well, let's do each of them a bit bigger. You can see how I'm getting a bit of a watercolor effect by adding a lot of water to these little shapes. And as I said, don't like that watercolor look, use less water. What I'm doing here is filling in these sections here. I'm leaving like a little white triangle, and then I'll just fill these in. Let's do the dark ones. I'm gonna have to wash my brush after I do that though, because I'm gonna get a lot of darkness on my brush and things are gonna be too dark. So I wanna not be too dark with these lighter little heart shapes. Again, I'm going for a wet watercolor look. Okay, do we want to do the wreath? Let's try the wreath. I'm going to do the wreath in sections, so maybe the first thing I'll do is go around and do all the berries. Because this bright red is the same everywhere, I'm not going to worry about even really washing my brush between berries because I don't mind the red berries kind of just jumping from one berry to the next. There's no light versus dark section to these berries. They're all the same. So that's why I don't have to worry about washing my brush at all or drying my brush. I can just go in here and do all these really quick. Since I'm using red, let's just go ahead and do the bow. Lighter sections first, and into the dark, and into the dark over here. I'm gonna rinse my brush out, do the light section here, and move into the dark. Again, wash my brush, do the light section over here. So you can see when I have a lot of variation in my shape, then I'm gonna be washing my brush often. And I haven't done these little sections here because they're so dark. I don't want to have them bleed out into my brighter red or lighter reds. So I'm just going to leave them for now, and I'll come back and do them in a little bit. While that's drying, I could probably do some of these little pine branches. I'll just have to be careful I don't dip my hand into my bow. I want to be drier while I'm doing this because if I'm too wet, all these little branches will blur, and you know how much work we put into them, so we don't want them to just disappear on us. So I'm just going to go around with kind of a slightly damp wet brush, but I don't want to be as puddly as I was with the snowflakes. I'm basically just stroking these little lines that we already did. And you can see how that brown is kind of adding just a touch bit of life to our mixture here so that the green isn't quite so flat. Either dry your brush or move on a little faster if you're really wet. And because this is pretty much all the same the whole way around the wreath, I'll just speed things up. All right, let's come in here and do a few more of these snowflakes. I think I'm going to fill in this section again and leave those little triangles white like I did before. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually let this kind of bleed out up to this next section. I don't know if I'm going to like this. It's an experiment. It's going to be a more watercolor look with this. What do you guys think of that? I don't know. Very wet. Did I let things get a little bit too messy? I don't know. Let's just add just a touch of water to these little dots here. We can see as it dries. It's one of those things we can always come in and refine the detail after, like that we've lost. We could come in with a pencil. I might have gone a little too wet with that one. With this one, I'm gonna just drag the water from the second little, like the smaller little section into the middle. And then I'll just do these here. Keep it a little bit drier. Wet these and keep them maybe a little bit drier. And then do all these little shapes here. Just make sure my brush is not too saturated with pigment, because again, I want kind of a pastel effect in some places. So in that case, I'll just wash and dry my brush a little bit more often. Okay, this one's looking really goofy. I'm gonna just kind of make the whole edge of it a little bit bumpy, and then I'll come back in with my pencil and create a little bit of definition, because it just really looks goofy right now. So I'm just gonna basically fill in this whole section with water and just have the little case of the shakes as I do it, so that it gets a little bit bumpy along the edges, so it's not like perfectly contrived. And like I say, you can see how afterwards I go about fixing it, which might be helpful for you if you have any that you over wet. I'm going to work a bit drier with this one. Do these little sections. That's a slightly darker snowflake, but I don't mind it. Once again, I'll just speed things up as I finish these up. Alrighty, I'm going to come in here. This is dry enough that I can just add some water there. It's not going to bleed everywhere. And then I'm going to let everything dry, because I can tell everything's quite wet, and if I try and work over here, up here on our other shapes, I think I'll probably blend or smear things accidentally. So I'm going to let things dry, and then I will come back and finish the remaining shapes. Okay, so everything is dry, so I'm going to come up to this top corner here and work my way this direction, wetting the shapes I still need to wet. So for the pine, I'm just going to come in here and just gently stroke these little pine needles in the same direction that I painted them. And you can wet your little branch as well. And that can flow beautifully into your greens. And I'm using a very light touch here. If you go too heavy, your pine branches will end up kind of getting a little bit thick and bulky looking. So just use very light pressure. And again, kind of taper off as you come to the end of the pine needles so that you get a nice fine tip. Again, you're kind of doing the same swinging kind of motion almost, if you will, that we did when we created them. Then I'm going to come into this ball here, and I'm going to just start by wetting it with a jumping motion, almost like I'm coming up and down and bouncing my brush rather than doing any strokes really. I'm kind of more or less bouncing. And that's going to allow me to maintain this sort of sparkly look that we gave this ball, where it doesn't have that same smooth texture, right? It's a little bit sparkly looking. And so bouncing it around is going to allow us to maintain that. You can even leave some little areas that are completely dry. And if you decide you need to come back in later and wet them, you can, but it's better to err on the side of not over wetting it, or you will lose this little bit of texture we created. So in this situation, less blending is best. I'll let that dry a minute and I'll come in and do the little hooks and everything. Let's just go ahead and work on our bow. So once again, lights first, and then work your way into the reds, and then finally the deep red. And before you come into your lights, make sure your brush is washed again. So every time I want to go into an area that's lighter than the area I was just working on, I'm going to dry my brush and often wash it first. And call that good. I still want to come in and kind of get those shadows blended. I feel like they're a bit dry, but I'm not going to touch them right now. I'm going to come into this section of the bell. Again, lightest areas first. And I'm going to kind of stroke once again in the direction of my pencil textures and wet that. Then come over here and do the same thing. I'm slightly wetter, I think, in this section of the bell than what I was you know, when I was like working on the bow, because I don't mind having a little bit of blending happening here. Now this snowflake that I kind of lost, I'm going to come in here, grab my indigo blue, and just kind of emphasize those shapes again so that I can just gently re-wet them. And for this, I'm just going to basically dot water on the little balls and the little curves. And once everything's dry, I'll come and add just the final touches. All right, so things are dry enough that I can come up and do this little section up here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the light sections first, work into my darks, and then come this direction. So as you can see, I want to create a nice transition where I'm not going too dark. I'm just going to lift a little bit in the middle there. So I'm going just kind of from light to dark, just gradually on this side, and then there's a little bit more on this side. I'll just gently wet the little hook thingamajig here. And this, I think I got a little more water on there than I needed. Should have been a bit drier. Okay, try and be drier this time, Jessica. Okay, that's better. You already know the drill. If you wanted that to be a little bolder, you could always go back over it with a watercolor pencil when it's dry. I'm gonna just come in here and just gently dampen things. Then I'm gonna do the shadow kind of behind here. It's kind of this dark brown, right? Or not dark brown, but darker brown that we put on here when we did the bell, but I guess I just never blended it yet. So I'm just gonna go back there. That gives the impression that this little bow is casting a bit of a shadow. And then I might even go ahead and just put a little bit of a little bit stronger shadow on my little piece of my bell here. Maybe even a little bit back here. Just really pushing the shadows that have kind of, I don't know if you want to say disappeared, or I didn't go dark enough in the first place, but just getting a little bit more brown on there. This is the darker brown. If you enjoyed working in watercolor pencil today, I think you'd enjoy my watercolor pencil playlist. I have some more Christmas tutorials on there that you can use for making handmade cards or home decor this Christmas season. In the meantime, I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye.